Hello everyone, this is Aida Gholami from Agrimatsaf Research Lab, and in today's video I'm going to present an interesting tutorial for an amazing software which is developed by Agrimatsaf team with the name IDF Curve Constructor. So this software gets your data, your measurements, or the table of maximums of the intensity of the precipitations, which I will give more explanations about in this video, and it creates the IDF curve and it can give you the numbers. You can export the numbers and etc. So let's get into the application, let's get into the software, and let's see how does it work. So you can see three tabs in here: input raw data, input data, and IDF. So which one is for you, input raw data or input data? You should know that in input data tab you can open your file for table of maximums. So this table of maximums is the brief name of table of maximum intensities. So the maximum intensities for the precipitations in your desired time step. It could be 15 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, it could be hourly, it could be 3 hour hourly, it could be daily, etc. So the table of maximums could be opened in here, and then so you will start from here. Or if you do not have that maximum table, you will start from here. So you should enter your raw data. What are these raw data? Those are the simple measurements in the gauge, which you can get the data from the companies or organizations, etc. And those are the measurements in the time steps. So each 15 minutes, for example, they have made a measurement and you have the list of those data. So that was the explanations for the difference between input raw data and input data. You can use any of these two options based on your information, based on your type of data, etc. Then in here I want to start from input raw data. Okay, in here if you have an Excel file you will go for it with no problems, but if you have a text file in here, you can see we have written, if you want browse text file, use delimiter. So in here you should, if you want to select a text file, if you want to open a text file, in here you should define the delimiter. Now I want to open an Excel. So I click on open file, I select my file, click open. It takes some moments in order to load your data. Based on the size of your data, it could take more or less time, but don't worry, it will load your data sooner or later. Okay, so now my data is loaded. When this option is enabled, you can see that your data is loaded. Okay, so now you can see I have 4 sheets. I have data for 15 minutes time step, I have data for 1 hour, 3 hour, and daily data. I want to start from the beginning. I want to start from 15 minutes data. So until my first sheet is loaded, let me explain these options. Let me start from these options. You can see the first row is header option in here, which you can check or uncheck based on your first row informations. Okay, so if your first row contains the titles and headers, okay, so my data is loaded now. If the first row, for example, in here in my data, the first row contains the titles and headers, so I will check it. Then you can see the input data timing segment. So now you should select the input data timing. So the simple as it is written. My data is, my sheet is 15 minutes data, so I will select 15 minutes. Now in here, if you can see, that this is grayed, okay? This is not enabled. That's because I should first define the type of these data, okay? So I should go for date. I should define the date and the rain columns, okay? Then you can see this option is enabled. So now you can see the maximums in outputs. That's for the table of maximums, okay? What type of maximum do you want in your table of maximums? In here, the most common is the yearly maximum, but you can go for maximum of month, January, February, etc. Maximum of a season. So you can select any months to make a season, okay? And then you can go for maximum of seasons. January, February, March, April, etc. All kind of these seasons. So I want to go for yearly maximum. Then you can see the use progress bar option. I do not use it right now because it slows down the speed. So I want to have more speed, so I do not use it, but that's, cute option here so that you can see how does it go. Okay, another tip that I want to mention in here so that we are now entering our data, the tip you should know is that the starting date always should be from the first day of the first month of the starting year. So it's not important what year you're inputting your data, obviously, but it should be from the first day of the first month of that year and from 12 a.m. Okay, you should start from there. So now in here, let me click on load data. So you can see the warning pops up, data issues. There's not data between the date and the date. Do you want create by zero? Yes, I want. So it can recognize the missing data and it recommends you to fill in the blanks by zero. So I check do it for all items because if you do not check it and click yes, it will keep finding the missing data. So I check do it for all item and click yes. And then it takes a moment and it says your data has been loaded and created the table. I click OK and let's get into the other sheet. You can see the table of maximums is now created in here. So I said before that you can load this table by your own. I meant this table. You can see it right now. You can input this table by your own if you have it. And if you do not have, if you have the raw data, you go for this sheet. Okay, so this is the table of maximums. So in each cell, you can see, so this one, what is this? This is the maximum of the intensity of the precipitations in year 1995 and in 15 minutes time step. What is this one? This one is the maximum of the intensity of the precipitations in 1995 in 30 minutes time step, etc. Okay, so that's the table of maximums. Another thing that I wanted to mention in here is this text right here. These data are in millimeter per hour if you input the raw data as millimeter. I have something to add to this text and let's get into here. This input data timing, if this is in these options, in these 6 options, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, hourly, and 3 hourly. If you have these data in millimeter, the output will be millimeter per hour. But if you have entered the data in this option, in daily option, so you have millimeters in here and the time step is daily, what you will get in the output will have the unit of millimeter per day. If you have entered the data in inch units, you will get inch per hour in these options and inch per day in this option. Okay, so that was another tip I wanted to mention. And then you can save the data in here. You can save the table of maximums. So I want to save it in here. I go for of table of maximums for 15 minutes time step. I click on save, and then it says the file was saved successfully. Click OK, and let's get to the IDF sheet. So in here you can see the different segments: return periods and frequency, and return periods and frequency analysis method. So in here you can see the different distribution methods. You can use them based on your study, based on your research, and based on your the type of your research. I want to go for gamma distribution in here. I select gamma distribution and I click on plot IDF. So now you can see the IDF curves are created based on the table of maximums and the other calculations in the software. In here you can change the settings of this plot. What you can do is that you can go for plot settings. You can use logarithm for horizontal axis. Click again on plot IDF and you can see what happens. And you can use logarithm for horizontal and vertical. You can uncheck both and go for plot IDF. You can see if you do not use logarithmic intervals, what happens is that all the curves just cover each other. So I do not recommend that. I want to use logarithmic intervals for vertical axis. And you can change the title. So I want to go IDF for 15 minutes. You can change it. And you can change the title of V-axis or H-axis. And another thing you can change also is the color of these curves. So let's say, for example, the curve for 10-year IDF is not recognizable. What I will do is to go for this colorful circle in here. I click on that, and then you can see the line settings. You can select any color that you want. I want a more recognizable color. Okay, so this one maybe is okay. I click OK, and then you can also change the thickness of the line. So I want to go for 2. Okay, I click save, and again I should click on plot IDF. You can see the line is changed right now, the color is changed, and also the thickness is changed and is now more recognizable. I think I'm over with this whole software. I do not have any other things to add to the software itself. Okay, maybe the other thing that I can mention is that you can export the IDF data. So I can click on export IDF data. I will save IDF for 15 minutes. Click save. And in here you can just export the data. Okay, you cannot export this plot, but probably in near future another option will be added in order that you can export the IDF plot also, but now it's not enabled. So that's for whole software. We are over with the software. That was how you can use the software, etc. But now I want to first draw this IDF curve based on the exported data, the exported IDF data in Excel, so that you can see how can you draw these IDF curves by yourself. So I will open IDF for 15 minutes data in here. It gives an error, and the cause is that you should not have this software opened. Okay, so you should close the software and then open the file. So in this file, you can see the data for IDF curve for the 15 minutes interval as we exported the data. Okay, so now what I want to do is to create the chart, the IDF chart in my own Excel sheet. Okay, what I should do is to select the data and go to charts, but you may know that in here these are numbers stored as text. Okay, so if you in this status of the data, if you go for creating the chart, you can see nothing is shown. What you will do is to select the whole data, go for convert to number. Okay, convert to number, and then you can see they are converted. Now I select the whole data, go for charts and create my chart. So that's it. That's the IDF curves. And the other thing that you can do is to make the vertical axis logarithmic. So I double click on that. So in here you can see logarithmic scale. That's for the chart you can create. And now let's get into the tables of maximums. The table of maximums. I have something to say for the table of maximums, but before that, I want to test IDF creating for hourly data also. And then we export the table of maximums of 1 hour data, and then we want to compare the table of maximums for 15 minutes data and 1 hour data. So I should enter my data. So my data is opened. I go for in hour sheet, 1 hour sheet. It takes some moments. So it's opened now. I go for hourly. So in here, if you select 15 minutes for hour sheet or any other sheet but the 15 minutes, you will get an error. You should pay attention to select the right input data timing option. So I go for hourly, and then I should select the date in rain so that I can have the maximums in outputs enabled. I want the yearly maximum, and I do not want progress bar also in here. I go for load data. Do it for all items, and yes. So now you can see the table of maximums for 1 hour data is also created, and in IDF I can also plot the IDF for hourly data. So that's the IDF also, but I said I want the table of maximums for hourly data, so I saved this table of maximums for 1 hour data. I save it, I close the software, and I also close and save the IDF for 15 minutes data. And now I want to open table of maximums for 15 minutes. And table of maximums for 1 hour data. Okay, let's look at these two sheets. So, you can see for the same year, and these data are for the same gauge, okay? For the same year and for the same time step, 1 hour data, 1 hour intensities, you can see the maximum of intensity is different. So in here is 2.2 and then here is 9.9. So it's nearly 5 times bigger than this one, okay? Why is this? So let's get into Paint so that I can have a whiteboard to explain. So you know that when we say in 15 minutes time steps, what we do in 15 minutes measurements, we measure the precipitation in each 15 minutes. So it's 0, 15, let's say. We start from there. And then it's 0, 30. And then it's 0, 45. And then it's 1. Okay, and let's say then is 1, 15, 1, 30, and 1, 45, and 2. Then, so that's for 15 minutes. Let's change the color. That's for 15 minutes, okay? Now, what do we have for 1 hour data? In 1 hour data, the measurements are like this. So we have one measurement in 0 in the starting hour, and then we have one measurement in hour 1, and then the next one in hour 2. So in here, when we want to create 1 hour intensity in table of maximums, okay, we have these measurements, and we want to create table of maximums for 15 minutes data and 1 hour data. Exactly like what we have in here, table of maximums for 15 minutes and for 1 hour. When we want to calculate this cell for 15 minutes, what we do? We do something like this. We measure the intensity from 0.15 to 1.15. We measure the intensity. Then we measure another intensity from 0.30 to 1.30. Okay, then we measure another intensity from 0.45 to 1.45. Then another one from 1 to 2, etc. From 1.15 to 2.15, from 1.30 to 2.30, etc. Okay? Then we take the maximum intensity of these measurements. So that's it. But in 1 hour data, what we do for when we have 1 hour measurements and we want to calculate this cell, we want to have the maximum intensity of 1 hour precipitations. Because of our measurements, because of our limited measurements, we can have just these measurements. We can have intensity from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2, and that's it. And then and etc. of course. But we can just have we can just have the maximum intensities between each hours. But in 15 minutes, you can see how much more measurements have we made and how more calculations can we have and more intensities we have to have the maximum from it. Okay, so that's the difference. I hope I have explained it clearly, but the general rule is that in 15 minutes data we commonly have the bigger intensities than 1 hour data, because we have more data, we are provided with more information. The probability to have the bigger intensity when we have these little time steps is much more than in here when we have just hourly time steps. So that's it. I hope you have understand. Now what we want to do is to calculate this cell from the input Excel. That's the last thing I want to do in this video, so that I can show you exactly what is this software doing and the accuracy of the calculations. So what we want is this cell for 15 minutes data. So we want the maximum intensity for 1 hour measurements in 1995. So in here, what we want to calculate is this cell right here. We want the maximum of the intensities of precipitations in 1 hour for 1995. So what we will do in here, as these are each 15 minutes, these are measurements for each 15 minutes, we want to first sum up the 4 cells so that we get 1 hour, okay? And then, as I mentioned in Paint in the whiteboard, we want to keep going on for these each 4 cells, okay? So we want these 4 cells, and then these ones, and then these ones, and keep going. So I copy the formula to 1995. So I copy the whole to the whole column. I copied the formula. Then what we want to do is to find the maximum of these data. What are these data? These are hourly data, okay? Hourly precipitations, because we summed up each for 15 minutes. So each for 15 minutes make up 1 hour data. What is the unit? This is millimeter, as the precipitation is measured in millimeter per hour in here. Okay, so we have millimeter per hour, which is the unit of intensity. So if we find the maximum number in this column for 1995, we can calculate this cell manually. Okay, now let's get into finding the maximum. So we want the maximum for E2, we do not know the number, okay? We can just go for selecting it, but as we have a huge number of data, this is not logical. What we will do is to calculate the cell number, okay? We have 365 days in 1995, or each year, and we have 24 hours in each day, in each of these days. Then we have 4 measurements in each hour. Okay, the number would be this one. So we want to find the maximum of E2 to E35040. So you can see this number is exactly the same as this one. So I hope you have understood the logic beyond the table of maximums. I hope you have understood how is the table of maximums created in the software. So that's it for today's video. I hope you learned something new. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. If you have any other questions, please don't forget to leave a comment, or you can just ask your questions contacting the website and the email addresses in there. And I hope you're doing very well. I'll see you then, and have a good day, and bye.